Hello, I'm Todd Spatafor, and this is another spectacular thing. So last week we created the RPi 5 NAS, and the week before we went over the RPi 4 NAS. Which one is faster and which one is better? Well, this week we're going to look at that. We're going to look at the difference between these two NASs and answer that question once and for all. Should you spend your money on the RPi 5 NAS or spend your money on the RPi 4 NAS? So as a quick recap, we used the same 4 2TB SSDs in both the RPi 4 and the RPi 5. I'm going to show you numbers that shocked even me. These numbers are amazing. I can't believe how much faster one is than the other. The Pi 5 is 13 times faster than the RPi 4 at sequential writes. And under mixed workloads, 60 times faster. So stick around and let me show you all the data. As a quick hardware recap, we have the Raspberry Pi 4 NAS in the Argon Eon case. It's a Raspberry Pi 4 with 8 GB of RAM, 4 2TB SSDs in RAID 10. The data interface between the drives and the Raspberry Pi is a USB 3. The CPU is a Cortex A72 quad-core, whereas the Raspberry Pi 5 NAS is a Raspberry Pi 5 with 8 GB of RAM. It's the same 4 2TB SSDs in RAID 10. The interface here is PCIe Gen 3. And the CPU is the Cortex A76, also quad-core, but it's about 60% faster. So the fair test, again, it's the same SSDs moved between the systems. It's the same RAID 10 configuration. It's the same network. I put it on a separate gigabit Ethernet network so that only those two machines were talking. No other communication was on that network. And the tests were run from my NUC over NFS. So this isolates the Raspberry Pi 4 USB 3 versus the Raspberry Pi 5 PCIe connector. So what is the difference? Well, let's look at the numbers. This first graph is here to show that we are saturating our network at 936 megabits per second. This is a gigabit Ethernet. This next graph shows that our sequential reads are 12.4% faster, but the real news is our sequential writes at 13 times faster, not percent, times faster. Isn't that impressive? Next we have the random 4K read and write speeds. The read speed is 4.5 times faster and the write speed is 5.2 times faster. The real news here though is that the Pi 4 had a high variability, going between 363 and 14,300 IOPS, and the Raspberry Pi 5 was rock solid at 26,500 IOPS. Next we have the star of the show, the 60 times faster and the 56 times faster. This is the mixed workload performance, 70% read, 30% write. The Raspberry Pi 5 is 60 times faster on read IOPS and 56 times faster on write IOPS. I was a little worried that we were maxing out our network capacity, so I did this little graph here. As you can see, sequential writes for the Raspberry Pi 5 reach 90% of the theoretical maximum for the network, and the Raspberry Pi 4 reaches 80% on the reads. However, on the sequential writes, we're only getting 3% on the Raspberry Pi 4. That's a USB 3 bottleneck right there. Finally, I put all this data into a nice little table so we can see that Pi 5 is the dominant winner in this competition. That's the PCIe bus beating out the USB 3 bus. Wow. Can you believe those numbers that we just saw? I can't believe how much faster the Raspberry Pi 5 was than the Raspberry Pi 4. So who should upgrade to the Raspberry Pi 5? Definitely upgrade if you frequently upload large files to your NAS. Definitely upgrade if multiple people use your NAS simultaneously. If you work in photo libraries or lots of small files, your Pi 4 feels sluggish or slow, you want to run additional services like Jellyfin, Nextcloud, or Docker containers, or you do regular large backups. Stick with the Pi 4 if you primarily stream movies. Both of them handle this quite well. Stick with the Pi 4 if single user light usage. If your budget is very tight, although I'll get to that in just a minute. If you're happy with your current performance, stick with the Pi 4 and mainly read operations, though the Pi 5 is still better on read operations. As far as price goes, as configured and in today's money, the Pentahat plus our Raspberry Pi 5 8 gigabytes is $193.90 total. The Raspberry Pi 4 with the Argon Eon case is $209.99. So even then, even if your pocketbook is a little bit light, I would stick with the Raspberry Pi 5. If you're starting fresh, definitely go for the Raspberry Pi 5 and the Pentahat. The links are down in the description below. The clear winner is the Raspberry Pi 5. These aren't incremental improvements, they're transformational. The 60x mixed workload performance is game-changing. To compare that to the Raspberry Pi 4, even during the tests, I thought that the Raspberry Pi 4 had locked up, and I rebooted it several times, but it was working, just really, really slow. The Raspberry Pi 5 doesn't just beat the Raspberry Pi 4, it's a completely different performance class. PCIe interface and the faster CPU make this the NAS the Pi 4 always wanted to be, and the NAS that I always wanted it to be. Trust me, I've got it running in my production workloads now, even though I've got PCIe Gen 3 set. So once again, the key takeaways: the Raspberry Pi 5 is 13 times faster for sequential writes, 60 times faster under realistic mixed workloads. Consistently, Raspberry Pi 5 is rock solid versus the Raspberry Pi 4. Remember, some of the numbers fluctuated quite dramatically for the Raspberry Pi 4, whereas the Raspberry Pi 5 was consistent all across the board. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week when we try something new with the Raspberry Pi. If this helped you decide, please hit that like button. If you like what I've done here, subscribe and you'll see more home lab content. Drop a comment below. Are you going to upgrade to the Raspberry Pi 5? Yes? No? Let me know why in the comments. But have a great day, and thank you for watching. Bye.